The Panthers will be hunting for another ACC championship this season. Mark my words. You might be thinking that they lose the two guys that really had a huge impact in their march to the ACC championship, in Kenny Pickett and offensive coordinator Mark Whipple. And you have a right to think that. I mean, Kenny Pickett was a phenomenal quarterback. He threw for 42 touchdowns, only 7 picks, and had a 165.3 passer rating, which is probably the highest for a Pittsburgh quarterback in ages. Maybe close to the highest ever that they've had. I really don't know. And Mark Whipple, he's now in Nebraska. Look, he struggled early on, but this season his offense was phenomenal. They tore up every defense that they faced. Every single one of them. But look at the remainder of their key players. Guys like Jordan Addison, running backs Israel Abanikanda, backup Vincent Davis, backup Rodney Hammond Jr., their 3 running back rotation, they all return, along again with Jordan Addison. Their entire offensive line returns. All of them. Their entire starting defensive line returns, specifically Habakkuk Baldonado and Khalija Cansey, just to name a few. They only lose Kayshawn Camp, and from my understanding, just looking at his stats, it seems like he was a rotational player. That's huge. Pittsburgh, just looking at the amount of guys, the amount of starters who are returning, it's crazy. They are reloading the same AK-47 that, tore holes in every defense this past season, especially on offense. They return so much. If Keaton Slovis or Nick Patty are just a half to 3/4, probably 3/4, which is still, losing a lot of production of what Kenny Pickett was, this offense will still roll with an elite wide receiver like Jordan Addison and a great running back like Israel Abanikanda. So I'm very high on this team, safe to say. I think that they're good or great. And I think that despite the fact that if they were placed in the Big Ten or the SEC, that they definitely go like 8-4, maybe as low as 7-5. The ACC and the schedule Pitt has been gifted with, even though they do play 2 non-conference Power 5 teams, their schedule is a gift from the high heavens. And we'll talk about why later. But in summary, they don't play an Ohio State or an Alabama or a Georgia, or even, in my opinion, they don't play a great team like Utah or even Michigan. I look at their schedule, and again, we'll get into this later. I don't see a single top 10 or even top 15 team on that schedule. I don't. I just don't. I don't see it. And that is huge. Now, that means if they lose a game or 2, definitely if they lose 2, they're out of the playoff conversation. Like, Alabama could probably get in with 2 losses, depending on if some strange circumstances happened. And even if they just get 1 loss, unless they win their conference championship game, you look at that schedule, and it would be hard for them to get into the playoff. But just for ACC championship game purposes, for finishing better than last year, which is the standard and probably most important goal of every football coach, improving. Constant improvement, especially when presented with the opportunity that Pitt has with the amount of returning starters in the trenches, at wide receiver, and at running back. Their schedule is a gift. And then you don't even have to really talk about, but we're going to anyway, just the returning production. Israel Abanikanda, 651 rushing yards for 5.3 yards per carry and 7 touchdowns. His backups, but guys that played in the rotation, Vincent Davis, who actually got more rushing attempts than him, 593 rushing yards for 4.2 yards per carry and 4 touchdowns. And Rodney Hammond Jr., 504 rushing yards for 4.9 yards per carry and 5 rushing touchdowns. It's crazy. And Nick Patty proved that he can run, that he has some dual threat capability. I think Slovis has some kind of a running ability, but I don't know for sure. I think he is more of a pro-style quarterback. You can check me on that. But they have a lot returning in the run game. You have Jordan Addison returning at wide receiver as well with 1,593 receiving yards for 17 receiving touchdowns on 100 receptions, more than double the receptions of any other player on the roster when it comes to receptions. It's crazy. The guy is he's an awesome kid, but he is a freak athlete as well. It's crazy. I mean, Pittsburgh they return so much. I feel like they're more reloading than rebuilding. They have brought in some transfers in areas that they have some weaknesses in, like the linebacker and secondary, where they don't return a lot, where they lose, a few starters here and there. They need to plug in some holes. I just think that Pittsburgh is a bright future ahead of them with Pat Narduzzi. I think Pat Narduzzi proved who he is as a coach this past season. And if you're a Pittsburgh fan watching this, and I know that there aren't going to be, a plethora of you don't really fill your own stadium. You have Penn State in your own state, which is obviously going to have a much bigger fan base, but still, you have a bright future and you have something to look forward to. And I think you're going to be more competitive this coming year, and you're going to be closer to a contender than a lot of people think. I don't even see Pittsburgh on many preseason top 25s, and I understand why. I don't think that's a trash opinion or even a bad opinion, but to a certain degree, I think Pittsburgh deserves more attention and more respect. I actually have them as a top 10 team, and if I were to make official predictions for championship games, which I will after spring practices, or more specifically spring games are over, I would probably have Pittsburgh or Clemson as the favorite to win the conference, followed closely by North Carolina State. But Pittsburgh just slightly in front. It's just, I love the addition of Keaton Slovis as a transfer. I thought Nick Patty looked good, and they returned so much. And Frank Cignetti Jr., I don't know if he is going to be Mark Whipple. He probably, to a certain extent, won't be, but he's had years of experience in the NFL, coaching quarterbacks. He spent time as an offensive coordinator all across the country. He was even the offensive coordinator for Pittsburgh for 2 years, from 2009 to 2010, and he started off his coaching career at Pittsburgh as a graduate assistant in 1989. So he knows the area around Pittsburgh, knows the school. I don't think he will be a bad OC by any means, and I think that the quarterback that he will be given, whoever wins the starting job in Nick Patty or Keaton Slovis, will certainly help him as much as he helps them. So this is just kind of the introduction part, my thoughts on Pittsburgh as a football program. And I genuinely, again, don't know how many times I'm going to say this, but I do genuinely believe that they can do damage in the ACC and that they are a team to watch out for. So now we're going to get into some key points, go just a little bit more in depth, whether that's using stats or using an article. And at the end, we'll look at their schedule and then close out this video. So first and foremost, the Panthers have one of the nation's best D-lines returning. Pittsburgh this past season, you look at their total sack stats, and it's crazy. 54 sacks with 406 sack yards. They also had 10 forced fumbles and 7 fumble recoveries. The majority of them, exclusively by the front seven, and the majority of the sacks specifically by defensive line players, whether they were parts of the rotation or whether they were main guys like Habakkuk Baldonado, Khalija Cansey, John Morgan III, or, John Petrishin, who was a linebacker, actually, pardon me. But still, their front seven and D line it's fascinating to me. And I cannot wait to see if they improve at all. If this D line improves even further from what they were last year, this will be one of the best. Maybe, they could very well be close to the best in the nation. You saw what they did against Michigan State. You saw what they did against basically every team they faced. Their secondary was not the greatest thing in the world. I think all the teams they lost to was mainly because they just got overwhelmed in the passing game department. Miami and Tyler Van Dyke passed for endless yards against them. Same with Peyton Thorne for MSU. And same with, oh my gosh, whoever Western Michigan's quarterback was. I would normally remember his name, but I don't. But that's really how Pittsburgh got beat on defense. It wasn't because of their defensive line. It was their secondary just left a lot to be desired from. So they got some additions there from the transfer portal, but this D-line, returning as much players as they do, is critical. And I think it will be a huge part to their success in 2022. Secondly, the offense is deep and talented at the offensive line, wide receiver, running back, and QB positions. Quarterback position, you don't really need the deepest rundown. Nick Patty, you saw what he looked like briefly in the Peach Bowl game and at other points in the season, just watching how he played, watching some spring practice film from 2021. He looked good. And just in that Peach Bowl game, looking at how he played, I thought that if he wasn't injured, the game very well probably would have went Pitt's way. But it doesn't matter. Injuries are a part of the game. I'm very confident you will see what I'm talking about if he does win the job over Slovis this coming season, which is more possible than a lot of people think. Slovis does have a reputation of his own, though. He was Pac-12 Freshman of the Year, and I think 2019. He started the majority of USC's games from 2019 all the way up to this past season, but his numbers and his stats and his passer rating has been steadily declining thanks to the, ever poor development of Claydo Helton, who's now at Georgia Southern. I think that he as in Slovis, will have a much better supporting cast at Pittsburgh. He'll have better coaching. He'll have, in a certain sense, even better talent because of the better development at Pittsburgh and the very subpar development at USC. But we will see. I mean, Keaton Slovis, after all, did have Drake London, who's one of the nation's top wide receivers in the draft, as a wide receiver at USC. And that was just quarterback. Running back, we've already described when I was talking about the players who are returning. Wide receiver, Jordan Addison, X-Factor guy. One of the best wide receivers in the nation. Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal kid. And with Jameson Williams off to the NFL, with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, it looks like it's basically him, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and everyone else behind them to a certain degree. So he's a really good wide receiver. Pittsburgh has some other wide receivers departing, but returning Addison is huge. And finally, we're going to briefly read an article here. It's about the offensive line and how Pitt is returning its entire offensive line in 2022. They're all back in 2022, the announcement from Pitt read, referring to Carter Warren, Marcus Minor, Owen Drexel, and Gabe Hoy. All four of the linemen are listed as redshirt seniors and are using their COVID eligibility to return for 2022. The four starting linemen will be joined by fellow starter Jake Cradle, who is currently a redshirt junior. Warren, Hoy, Cradle all have 3 years of experience starting on Pitt's line and have been key contributors for the program since 2019. In 2021, they were joined by Drexel, and they were also joined by Marcus Minor, who transferred from Maryland. Pitt had already stocked its offensive line with talent for years to come, with players like Ryan Bayer, Matt Goncalves, Branson Taylor, and Blake Zubovic, ready to step in when the upperclassmen departed. But with that transition, there was likely a drop-off in play as the new unit developed chemistry. That problem will be eliminated with all the starters returning, and Slovis or Patty, if Patty beats him out, will have at least one season behind a line of proven contributors. Again, chemistry is so important, and that's what makes Pitt returning all of their main contributors on the defensive line and offensive line and running back and their main wide receiver so important. All of their main areas where they are good at look to possibly get better. outside of quarterback because obviously Kenny Pickett leaves, and I don't know if Slovis or Nick Patty will be able to replace him or be better or at the same level as he is. But maybe they will be. This is college football. I mean, multiple things have surprised us before. This would be a surprising thing if someone stepped up and was at a similar level to Pickett, but it's not like this hasn't happened at college football before. At Clemson, another team in the ACC, Kelly Bryant replaced by Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor Lawrence ended up very much, to a large degree, outdoing him. And Kelly Bryant, I think, is no longer, he's not even in the NFL. Lawrence was a first-round pick. It's not to say Kelly Bryant was thought of as anything special at Clemson when he started, but still, I think it's a decent comparison to make. So the offensive line is deep. That article will be linked down below. And finally, let's talk about Pittsburgh's schedule before closing out this video. Their schedule is, again, gift from the high heavens. I've already said that. They open up against Thursday, September 1st, against West Virginia. Home game, they should beat West Virginia. Neil Brown, no offense. West Virginia looks like, kind of a dumpster fire to a certain degree. And then Pitt has another home field game against the Tennessee Volunteers, which is the second Power 5 non-conference opponent in a row. Tennessee is good. I think they're a top 25 team, but Pittsburgh has the benefit of home field advantage. This will be a close one, likely a shootout, but I'm going to give Pitt the benefit of the doubt here. Though if Tennessee wins, I would not be shocked at all. This is probably the second most likely or third most likely game that Pitt is going to lose. Saturday, September 17th, Pitt travels to a Group of 5 opponent in Western Michigan. That should be a win. It should be a revenge game from this past season. Pitt then returns home to host Rhode Island September 24th. Easy win. It's an FCS school. Saturday, October 1st, they host Georgia Tech. There's not really much of an explanation needed there. Georgia Tech lost its best player in Jahmyr Gibbs to the portal, and they, can't get any more than 3 wins a season. Pittsburgh then hosts Virginia Tech October 8th. New head coach and new staff, a lot of new players. I think that'll be a Pitt victory. Pitt then has a bye October 15th before traveling to the Louisville Cardinals October 22nd, which I think will be another win. Louisville is another program with a lot of questions surrounding it. Saturday, October 29th at North Carolina will be a tough game. This is likely the second or third, along with Tennessee, most likely game that Pittsburgh could drop. I think it will be a win, though. North Carolina is this interesting bipolar team. Despite recruiting at a high level, they fell flat on their face this past season. I have more faith in what Pat Narduzzi can do than what Mac Brown can do, if I'm being honest. That's October 29th. October 5th, Pittsburgh returns home and faces Syracuse, which should be a win. November 12th. I think I might have said October 5th. I meant November 5th. November 12th, Pittsburgh travels to Virginia, who just, lost its head coach, hired Tony Elliott. That should be another win for the Panthers, in my opinion. Hosting Duke November 19th, I think that will be, that's kind of Duke has been ruined for years. Pitt should win that game relatively easily. Again, this is just predictions. There's a lot of unpredictability that goes into college football, and for the most part, especially this early in the season, I really don't bother messing with it. So at this point, I basically have Pitt going 11-0, but they're going to drop their last game of the season, and I think at most, I think that the most Pitt can go, the highest in the regular season, is 11-1. They have an easy schedule, but they have holes. They lack amazing talent, and their coaching staff, while great, is not infallible. Most coaching staffs, no coaching staff really is, but you get the point. At Miami, Saturday, November 26th, I think Pitt loses its first and only game of the regular season. I think on the road at Hard Rock Stadium, which is probably going to be full, seeing that there's hype, life around the program now that Mario Cristobal is here, and they're going to be playing better. They have Tyler Van Dyke. I think Miami will win that game. So I have Pitt going 11-1. A lot of that is because of their easier schedule. If they had to play at Clemson and at Miami, along with some of their other tough away games, like, at North Carolina would probably be their worst, I might have them going 10-2 or something. But their schedule is pretty easy. Miami, Florida is the closest to a loss that I see, and I think it will be. North Carolina away and hosting Tennessee will also be tough games, in my opinion. But that's just my view of Pittsburgh's 2022 schedule and Pittsburgh's 2022 football team in general. If you liked this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and click that notification bell so you can watch more of my videos. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.